are here every Saturday and Sunday morning from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Up with me today, Kevin Cirilli. He's chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg. Emily Tisch Sussman was the vice president of campaigns for American Progress. She's now a senior advisor at Swing Left. Gabe Sherman is a special correspondent for Vanity Fair and an MSNBC contributor. And Alexi McCammon is a political reporter with Axios. Kevin, I want to start with you, get a sense of where we are at this point. I'm setting up the temporal parameters here. We are 2 days out. Let's look at the travel schedule for the president. He's going to be in Georgia today, looking at his itinerary tomorrow. It is Ohio, Indiana, and Missouri. A trifecta, 3 campaign stops in 1 day. What does that tell you about how he sees this election?
Well, it's interesting where he's not going, which, he's not going to Arizona, which I think is remarkable, given that his closing argument has really been all about immigration. But in terms of Ohio, just the importance there. But look, if you look at Georgia in particular, I think that you could have a situation could be the dominant headline of the midterm elections potentially on Wednesday morning, especially if she wins the governorship. And you've got Oprah, who's literally going door to door down there. The bottom line is that the president making a case on immigration, and a lot of the Democrat strategists that I talked to, David, are saying that that could actually have the adverse effect that he wants to see happen by mobilizing Democrats to get to the polls. You're not seeing Democrats engage on that issue. They're sticking to health care. Think of how fast the pendulum has swung on health care, for example, that Democrats are now seizing on that particular point.
Alexi, let me turn to you. I just want to get a sense from you of Kevin saying we'll find this out Wednesday morning. You look at the polling, you look at the number of toss-ups. I think the Cook Political Report is saying 29 House seats are now toss-up races.
Yep.
Your sense of how this might play out on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning?
Well, I was told by both executive directors of the DCCC and the NRCC that they fully expect we will not know who controls the House for a week or so, which is horrifying to think, because that just drags out these nerves even longer for many people around the country. But, I think that Republicans have a much narrower path to keep control of the House, and that is worrying them. They know that Democrats set out from the start to target more than 100 GOP-held districts and seats. They have a broader path to take control of the House, to get those 23 net gain seats that they need to win control of that chamber. And that's not to say that it's going to be easy, but they have many more paths. If we look at places like Pennsylvania, they could pick up 4 seats there. New Jersey, Democrats are predicting to pick up 2 to 4 seats there. They're already a third of the way with those 2 combined to get what they need, and I think that's worrying some Republicans.
Just want to get everybody up to speed here on the state of the race. We have early voting numbers. Obviously, that's a huge focus for folks here as we look to see what might happen. Continues to be a big story. Some 33 million Americans have cast their ballots already. Big rallies, as we've been saying, continue across the country. 4 p.m. this afternoon, President Trump and President Obama speaking simultaneously, counter-programming this afternoon. Today, President Trump is in Macon, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. President Obama is going to be in Gary, Indiana, and Chicago. We are processing all this data, trying to get a sense of the state of the race 2 days out. There is this emerging consensus among Democratic strategists and Republican strategists based on public polling and private polling and early voting and likely turnout that it is likely Democrats could pick up somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 seats in the House of Representatives. And when it comes to the Senate, many of those races still statistical ties. We're going to get some new data this morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. We're going to bring you those numbers as soon as we get them. Gabe, we're talking about what's happening on the ground. Take us inside the West Wing. You were so good at doing that, about how the president is approaching this race, what his thinking is going to these states, what his thinking is as he approaches, like what topics he's talking about at these rallies.
Yeah, a few things. Clearly the president has decided that he wants to mobilize the coalition, the hardcore Trump base that turned out in 2016 that a lot of the national pollsters didn't see coming, and he has doubled down on, and in fact kind of gone beyond wherever he went in 2016 in terms of this divisive anti-immigrant message, which to me, looking at the landscape in terms of just pure policy and politics, the Republicans have a very strong case to run on. The economy is at record high. There's relative peace and prosperity around the world. And yet, they're not talking about the economy. They're talking about this caravan that's weeks away from the southern border. So that, to me, is showing you how Trump thinks he has the Republican Party in control. But as you said, if there's a backlash, this is really much going to be on him.
Let's talk about policy discipline, Emily. Gabe bringing up the point that Republicans could be talking about the economy, and the economy. They're not doing that, maybe to their chagrin, because the president's sort of deciding what they're talking about. Let's look at Democrats. They welcomed the fact that Republicans were talking about health care. They said, great, this is our issue, let's keep talking about it. Help us understand policy discipline on the Democratic side.
That has been very strong. Democrats are running a very positive case for each and every candidate, which is something that I think a lot of Democrats were looking The energy came from the pushback against the election of Trump. And then what ended up happening is the field emerged of incredibly strong candidates who are running that were right for the district and had very strong policy platforms themselves. So the people who are getting out and volunteering are they're really not just a reaction to Trump. They are getting out because they are for the actual candidates. And I do actually want to push back for a second on the presumption that the economy is so strong and the Republicans should be running exclusively on that. The job growth numbers are there, but actually slower than Obama, right? And we know that American companies are starting to pull jobs because of the tariffs and the trade war. We also know that taxes are going to go up because they got rid of the state and local tax deduction in many of these states where Democrats are trying and going to win many of the House seats. So I think the fact that Democrats are running good candidates, running good campaigns, but more so the fact that Democrats are actually running stronger volunteer operations through the campaigns, through organizations like ours at Swing Left. We've seen record-breaking volunteers. Yesterday, it was through the roof. We heard stories all over the place of the fact that campaign offices were actually running out of things for volunteers to do. Their entire volunteer universe was getting hit in one day. And when they got out and started having those conversations on the trail, I think something we expected in this election was that the bottom was going to fall out of the Republican enthusiasm. Something I think we didn't necessarily expect was that there would be so many independents who were actually persuaded both by the positives on the Democratic candidate side, but also by the fact that the Republicans have really fallen in line with Trump.
Kevin, jump in here. I see an active eyebrow raise there.
They've also got Oprah and Taylor Swift knocking on doors and Instagramming for them. You know, in terms of the issue of the economy, though, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how trade and the trade debate plays out in the long run. Because if you talk to Senator Sherrod Brown and you talk to Senator Elizabeth Warren, they are not pushing back on tariffs, for example, particularly with the NAFTA deal. So there actually is this strange populist streak in American politics where there's some strange bedfellows, so to speak, in terms of the trade debate. But what I find interesting, and you picked up on this with the tax issue in particular, is that the president has not been taking the tax reform issue to the campaign trail, which has been interesting. And I think Democrats, much more than making the case against the 250,000 jobs that were added to the U.S. economy in the month of October, I think they're talking about entitlements. I think they totally have seized upon the issue of taking away
I just want to say
entitlements.
here, you were the man who kickstarted a lot of this conversation. You sat down with the Republican leader, and then became the star of many Democratic campaign ads.
That note, I'll take it down.
Take it down. Alexi, what happened on Friday when President Obama went to Miami and then to Atlanta? As I saw it, he crystallized what the Democrats' message is. So we can talk about the utility of him getting people out to the polls, him as a unifying figure, somebody who's galvanizing people. But just in terms of messaging, how important was his appearance there? I should say he's going to be speaking again today at 4 o'clock.
Right. Well, many Democrats and Democratic strategists firmly believe that no one is more popular than Obama, maybe Michelle Obama, with millennials and people of color. And that is something, those are two groups that Democrats are really banking on to help them sort of build this blue wave to
And those
victory.
are people who did not turn out in 2016. You look at places like Wayne County in Michigan, you know, Hillary Clinton turned out something along the lines of 70,000 fewer votes just in that county alone, which would have been enough to carry the state of Michigan in delivering her the presidency.
Right. And so we're seeing with Obama on the trail and Donald Trump on the trail this sort of proxy of two presidents and over their legacy more than anything. But we see a clear difference in the messages from Republicans and Democrats, where Republicans are campaigning on fear and anger. They're telling people to vote against this, you know, chaotic mob of Democrats who are just so out of control they could never control Congress, otherwise life would be terrible. And Democrats are out there sort of giving a more optimistic vision for the future, saying vote for us, not just against Donald Trump. And that is something that Obama, you know, interesting in his message, he's obviously continuing that message and that rhetoric, but he is not holding back when it comes to criticizing President Trump and pointing out sort of the facts of how ridiculous this whole thing has become.
It's still Obama's party. Because Hillary Clinton isn't really his out there.
Well, the New York Times had a devastating piece the other day reporting on how almost no Democratic candidates want Bill Clinton as a surrogate out there. And to me,
that's not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, but I think
it's
they want Obama. They want Obama.
Yeah. But I think again, it shows you that the sort of the Clinton machine. You know, one of the consequences of 2016 is that it's really not their party anymore.
Is there still a machine?
Well,
in waiting.
It's pretty diffused.
Yeah.